All right, so at this time, we'd like to call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission of October 20th, 2016. With that, could we please have Mayor Meister, please, help us with the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
David, can we take roll, please?
Good evening. Commissioner Lightfoot.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Hubner.
Here.
Commissioner Geluccio.
Here.
Commissioner Elchel.
Here.
Vice Chair Buckner.
Here.
Chair Agai.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Awesome. Approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion for approval.
Second.
Tap second. On the floor. If you tap on the floor. Right there.
Thank you. Told you I didn't have to that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Motion passes. Approval of the minutes. Next item, sorry. Approval of the minutes.
Approve.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Public comment. David, do we have any slips at this time?
No public comment at this
I
time.
think we have
Here
one.
comes 1, 2.
We do.
Two.
Susanna, followed by Cynthia Blatt.
Thank you.
You got it.
Please, thank you.
Breath.
Good evening, Commissioners, again. My name is Susanna Lagudis. I'm a homeowner, resident, and vice president of my HOA, who has resided at 1124 North La Cienega Boulevard in West Hollywood for nearly 26 years. I love our wonderful and unique city and community. I'm here to request that you remove item 9A from consent on tonight's agenda. By approving this resolution, the Commission would be going far beyond what the City Council has already allowed in its current unamended conditional use permits for this property, with no evidence whatsoever that it will not be detrimental to the integrity, sleep, work, lives, and general welfare of the neighborhood and its residents. And you would be going beyond staff recommendations by eliminating the requirement for a mitigating surrounding sound wall and allowing for amplified sound on the roof. You would be permitting not only the continuation, but the enhancement of this property's already amply demonstrated disruptive and disrespectful behavior without having paid any attention to those of us who, unlike yourselves, will be directly impacted by your decision. Should you choose to adopt the resolution tonight, I would like to ask the city clerk on the record and receive a reply on the record to allow me to submit an appeal to the decision at end of business on Monday, November 31st, since 10 days from today falls on Sunday, the 30th of November. Thank you.
You mean October?
In October.
Of October, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
very
the
much.
correction.
Cynthia Blatt?
Yes, I'm
Oh,
done.
I'm sorry about that. Cynthia Blatt, please.
Hi, Cynthia Blatt, West Hollywood. I'm also here to ask you to reconsider your vote on the Pali Hotel's, what is it now, third request for a conditional use permit. I came to the last City Council, the last Planning Commission meeting on a whim to see what was going on. About a couple of years ago, I got involved in city doings because there was a building being built next door to me that was just too big and massive and overwhelming. And I went to the design review, and my neighbors were there, and they were treated with such a level of sarcasm and disrespect that after the meeting they were crying, they were upset. They came and argued, maybe not in a sophisticated way, maybe not in the way the city was used to hearing, but they spoke from the heart and they were ignored. And what I saw when I came here last time was, once again, I saw the neighbors who lived surrounding that hotel being ignored and being subjected to sarcasm. And I ask that you consider what was in the staff report for the Pali Hotel. They have not been a good neighbor. You've gone far beyond what staff recommended you do, and more importantly, you have gone beyond the limitations placed on the Pali Hotel by the City Council that were not amended in any of the subsequent CUPs. You did not have a sound study, for example. What you had was a report by an employee of the hotel. At least this hotel was supposed to have 16 residences and 20 hotel rooms. They submitted their report to the city's lodging study, listing 37 hotel rooms. So first of all, they completely violated the bonus that they were given to add another floor by creating 37 hotel rooms. That's number one. Number two, where'd the other hotel room come from? They were permitted for 20 hotel rooms and 60 residences. Beyond that, in the staff report that you received, the city of Santa Monica talked about the increase of noise in a dining area when there's music because people speak above the music. And then you went on to recommend a 3-sided sound wall, ignoring completely the businesses to the south of the hotel and to the east of the hotel that have outdoor dining. Given all of these, and this is only the beginning, in the original approval of this project, again, for 16 residences, which were later allowed to be scattered through the hotel and are, in fact, being rented for 30 days or less, which is a violation of the short-term rentals, the city council said that this was in, and the staff said that this was in agreement with Vision 2020, which said that you considered business and the surrounding neighborhood. So I appeal to you to reconsider this vote and bring this back at a future time when you have had the time to reconsider the package in its entirety, because I haven't touched on all of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On to item 7. Oh, do you have something to say?
May I ask a question of the city attorney? What, if anything, is the procedure that would allow such a reconsideration?
You would have to renotice another public hearing at a future date, because the only question before you tonight on this agenda is whether this resolution memorializes the direction you gave us last time. If you wanted to consider new evidence or rethink about what you heard last time and continue your deliberation, that would have to be at a future notice public hearing so the rest of the public would know to come and be part of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it, I seem to recall, maybe, that it is the case that the only someone who voted in favor of it could bring up a reconsideration.
That's at the same meeting.
Oh,
So-
I see. So at a subsequent meeting, all right. So I would move to bring up a reconsideration at a subsequent meeting pursuant to the suggestion of Ms. Blatt.
Can we make that?
What you would be asking would be directing staff to renotice, to reopen the public hearing, and
Exactly what I meant to
hear
say.
more evidence on the matter before you make a final decision, rather than approving your resolution.
And one commissioner can
Well,
make
actually, I have
that.
one question. Can we discuss it? Can we discuss this now at this point in the hearing? Or
Well,
Are you moving that, Commissioner Alchel?
Pardon?
Are you making a motion?
I did, yes.
made a motion?
you mean just because we're still in public comment?
Yeah.
Is it? We can wait till we get to the consent calendar
Again,
to.
do you want to wait till we get to
talk
consent
about that
calendar? and make the
further.
motion?
Thank you, Mr.
Sure.
Chair.
And then I can ask another question.
Please.
Well, mine's real basic. Should this move forward this evening, I mean, then there's an appeal period, and the speaker mentioned Sundays when the 10th day falls. How does that work?
I think it would move forward to the Monday. We would never make the appeal period shorter and make them file on Friday. It would
Okay,
fall on
just
the
for
Monday.
clarification. Okay, thank
Could
you.
we pronounce that the appeal period would end on that date, today?
Yeah, I think that's how the code reads, because we're never going to give someone a shorter amount of time than they'd be entitled to under the code.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go on to item 7, the director's report. Mr. Kehoe.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. I have just a couple of items. At the last city council meeting, the city council approved the selection of a team to work on our spectacular digital billboard on Sunset Boulevard. The team will consist of Orange Barrel Media, Tom Whitcomb Architects, and Mocha. The winning proposal is a really exciting three-dimensional sign that will have digital signage, traditional signage, will have an art component. It could possibly also have some displays that will happen at night, but not in the daytime. So we're really excited and looking forward to developing a signage for that site on Sunset Boulevard. So that will have a design process. It will come to the Planning Commission for review, the Arts Commission for review, so there'll be plenty of opportunity for the public to weigh in on this process as it goes on to City Council. Next, I'd like to just point out a couple of meetings that are coming up. One is the East Side Working Group. That's meeting on Tuesday at City Hall, so people who are interested in East Side affairs can come to that meeting. And then also, I also want to make a special announcement for the annual Historic Preservation event. It's on October 27th at the Schindler House from 6 to 8. That's going to be a really good event where we'll go over our commercial survey and look at some great things that we're doing in historic preservation. So that's all I have for tonight.
John, could you tell the commission what part of the discussion at the city council regarding the hotel survey and potential hotels that, as it regards potential hotels that come to the planning commission?
So say exactly what did you want again?
Okay. When the city
Right.
council discussed the hotel survey,
Right.
there were obviously some problematic results of a scenario 3 whereby we might approve additional hotels. And the city council gave direction regarding those. I'm willing to outline it if you can't remember the.
I don't have that right on the top of my head, but I do remember that study is a specific point in time about the occupancy rate and that type of thing. As far as the hotel occupancy, it's not a planning document to use for planning for the future for hotels. So that's,
Well, as I recall, city council said that any hotels that would be coming
Yes, would
before
be
planning commission should
would be
include that.
referenced, yes, that's
The
correct.
hotel survey should be referenced, and that particular things should be addressed in the EIRs as it pertains to the results of the hotel survey as well,
Yeah,
correct?
that's right. They did say that. They want that referenced in
Okay,
our reports,
all right,
yes.
thank you.
Thanks, John. Awesome, thank you. Items from Commissioner Jones.
Nothing at this time, thanks.
You, Commissioner DeLucia.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Alchel.
Nothing, thank you.
Vice Chair Buckner.
Nothing from me at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Huebner.
No, nothing, thank you.
And Commissioner Lightfoot.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we will go on to our consent calendar, item 9A, 8465 Holloway Drive. Commissioner Alchel, I believe you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, I make a motion pursuant to the language that the city attorney just recited a few minutes ago. If you would please recite it again.
To renotice another public hearing on the application before you to consider more evidence and make a final decision.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Can I ask you a question? Oh, anybody can second it? Oh, but are you making a second? Okay. Why are we going to do this? What are we going to reconsider, Commissioner Alchel?
Well, there were several things that the woman that testified just before Ms. Blatt stated that I think needs looking at. First of all, or maybe Ms. Blatt said it, I don't know, that the supposed sound report was not done by a sound person, it was done by an employee of the hotel. Secondly, I heard that, which I think was generally known, but I don't know whether or not it was I don't recall whether it was discussed at the prior hearing, that the entitled residences, which were 16, were discussed at the prior hearing, And I did not know that I did know that they weren't being used as permanent residents or sold as condominiums. I did not know that they were rented out per night as hotel rooms. So I think there's considerable new evidence to address with respect to the use of their entitlement and whether or not these requests should be granted.
If I can ask the city attorney, can staff address any of those concerns, or are we allowed to have that type of discussion right now?
It's such a tricky issue because you can't consider new evidence to make your decision tonight. It's hard to unhear something.
No, I understand.
But your decision has to be based on what was heard during the public hearing. So if you want to consider new evidence, it would have to be
Right.
at a future meeting.
My concern was, for instance, with respect to the sound issue, that the applicant hired a third-party sound engineer to conduct that. Based on the best of my current actual knowledge, which, that's where it is at this point. With respect to the remainder of those items, I can't speak to them, but I feel, given that they had a full hearing and we kind of fleshed out all the facts at that time, it would be kind of redundant, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I have
Are there any other comments?
Well, I mean, I also recall them talking about the use of the rooms.
Me too. I do too.
And then they admitted
You
that
can
they
answer a
were in
question. I just
violation
don't
and
have
were
a
now in
hearing on it.
compliance.
Right.
But they are now in compliance, or?
Yes, that was what.
Yeah, I actually,
came out in the report.
as far as, I believe it was a professional person that did come out to do the sound study. What I recall from the meeting was that it wasn't done during a special event period. But based on what is in here this evening and what we discussed at the meeting, I actually think that they over-conditioned, and I don't mean that in a negative way, all the steps they're going to need to go through once they put amplified sound on the rooftop and mitigation measures in order so they can comply and not be a nuisance to the neighbors.
And we also have review hearings,
Yes,
both with the
exactly.
director and with the commission.
Yeah.
Right. I think Rachel wants to clarify information that is in the public hearing record that was discussed at the last meeting, and that's appropriate to talk about.
Thank you so much. Rachel?
And just to clarify, as I stated in the public hearing, there were residences that were previously being rented out for less than 30 days, and that's actually what postponed the project coming forward to the Planning Commission. So essentially, staff worked with the hotel to ensure compliance for anything prior to coming to the commission. So they are now only renting those residences for 31 days or more.
And
One thing that was, one thing that I didn't realize until later is when we looked at the sound study that was presented to us, it just considered buildings, 2 buildings on Hacienda, and I never thought about it affecting any other residences, certainly not residences on La Cienega. Yet the people who showed up to complain are La Cienega, correct? Okay, which wasn't addressed in the sound study. Whoever did that sound study or not, they didn't address those buildings.
city attorney / staff, is there anything to?
So, and I don't want to speak for the sound study expert, the engineer, but essentially the study identified those as potential locations for issues and not otherwise.
Did they identify La Cienega?
As not being an issue. So they didn't mention it because it wasn't specifically in that radius that they looked at, something that they thought would be impacted by noise.
Yet the people who came and complained were people who live on La Cienega.
Which is why we put the sound wall on 3 sides.
So just to kind of bring this all to
Bring it
making
back.
sure we're all on the same page, Commissioner Alchul, does your motion still stand? Do you
Yes,
in light of what we just
I
heard?
think also it should be verified as to whether or not those residences are being actually used as residences.
That has been verified by staff
Yeah, so
and code compliance
At the point of hearing or today?
at the point of hearing. And my understanding is that they've continued to comply.
Okay. Well, I still think there are people that need to be heard. So yes,
So we can take a vote on that first.
Yes.
So why don't we call the question on what's on the,
First, see if there's a second.
oh, there was, Sheila seconded.
Got it.
Okay, so we,
Second.
Okay. The motion fails. Well, I don't say that, you'd say that, right?
Motion fails, 2 ayes, 5 noes.
Okay, so then the question is, does the resolution in your packet reflect what you directed staff to bring back? That's the
Is
question.
there a motion to move the consent calendar?
I would just like to register my no vote the night of the meeting on this item.
Understood. Thank you very much. Motion passes.
Motion passes, and the resolution the Planning Commission just approved memorializes the final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees.
Thank you very much, and we'll move on to public hearings. Item 10A, the zone text amendment for corporate rentals and staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Garen Serapian, and I am an Associate Planner with the Long Range and Mobility Planning Division with the City. This evening, we bring you a zone text amendment regarding the prohibition of the use of corporate rentals of dwelling units in the city. Just a little bit of background. In October of last year, the city adopted an ordinance prohibiting the use of short-term vacation rentals in the city. To summarize, the ordinance expressly prohibits renting all or a portion of a dwelling unit for 30 days or less to transient visitors, and also advertising dwelling units for short-term rentals. Additionally, the ordinance applies to both existing units and any new proposed housing units in the city. Shortly following the adoption of that ordinance, the City Council directed the city attorney and staff to prepare an ordinance prohibiting corporate rentals of dwelling units. Corporate rentals are a type of use that provides fully furnished living accommodations to persons traveling for business, which may involve rentals exceeding the 30-day limit, so it wouldn't fall in the short-term rental prohibition. The original council staff report provided to you in Exhibit B states the original direction. And it says some of the issues that that came up because of that was when a residential unit is being used for commercial activities such as vacation or corporate rentals, then rather than the purpose for which they were constructed, the supply of affordable and market rate housing in the city is diminished, and the ability for the city to achieve its housing goals is compromised. So to address these issues and respond to the council directive, staff has worked with the city attorney to prepare an ordinance that we feel meets the goals of the original council direction. We acknowledge that there may be both pros and cons to either prohibiting or allowing for corporate rentals, and we will certainly express all of those viewpoints as we take this item to the City Council. The recommended ordinance, just to summarize a few bullet points, will include adding a definition of corporate housing in our definition chart, adding the use corporate rentals to both residential and commercial land use charts, which the latter of which involves mixed-use projects and prohibits such uses in all of those zones. Adding a condition to the development permit approval to restrict corporate rentals in any new proposed residential development projects, including mixed use, and adding a condition to the proposed condominium CCNRs, which are the conditions, covenants, and restrictions to restrict corporate rentals. Staff acknowledges that the proposed changes are restrictive on corporations or businesses that encourage their employees to live and work in West Hollywood. However, it would not prohibit a business from providing housing by an employee's stipend to that employee. The proposed amendments would ensure that dwelling units are being consistently occupied and they're not being left vacant for certain amounts of times. So what may potentially be happening is corporations may be reserving units for 12 to 24 months and leaving it available for if it's needed by an employee, and potentially leaving a unit vacant for 80 or 90% of the time. So just to summarize some outreach, staff presented the ordinance to the Long Range Planning Project Subcommittee back in July of this year. Some commissioners expressed concern that the ordinance would be difficult to enforce for existing buildings, and one alternative that was brought up during the meeting was to not prohibit corporate housing, but develop a new land use with a different regulatory framework than a typical new proposed residential project would have. Additionally, we proposed the zone text amendment to the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber expressed a similar sentiment that this would also be unfriendly to businesses who want to do business in West Hollywood, and the city should consider alternatives that are less restrictive but still provide a regulatory framework around the use of dwelling units for corporate rentals. Staff has been unsuccessful in finding hard data to prove to what extent dwelling units are being used for corporate rentals. There are various online marketplaces such as HomeSuite or Sublet.com that offer short-term furnished apartments in West Hollywood, but we don't have data to show if they're being utilized or to what extent are they being leased out for that purpose. So to conclude, I just want to reiterate that the ordinance in front of you and the resolution was the directive from the City Council. We acknowledge that there are pros and cons to this approach. If the Commission collectively decides to propose any alternatives that may be drastically different from the original Council directive, we would certainly include that alternative in the staff report that we take to the City Council that was originally directed. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of staff from the commissioners? None? Hearing none, we will now begin the public comment portion of the hearing. Genevieve Morrill, if you could please come up, followed by Cynthia Blatt.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Genevieve Morrill, President and CEO of the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, speaking here tonight about the ban on corporate housing. You know, as staff has done a terrific job really in making sure that we were involved in what they were doing. But really, as they said, there's really no evidence of what may be happening. And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight, is the lack of research and maybe taking some time to do that. You know, we understand the intention behind it. I was at the council that night when it was directed. It was on the short-term rental to create, it was a way to deter corporations from taking rentals off the market and making them short-term rentals under the pretense of a corporate rental. But we surely can come up with something better than a ban. And this written ordinance is going way too far and would be really bad for business. Corporate housing is a long-established concept where you rent a furnished apartment, usually for 30 to 90 days, sometimes less. Typically, all utilities and services are included. It's like an all-inclusive hotel without the daily housekeeping. Traveling employees can make strong case for corporate housing if they're away on business assignments that are 20 days or longer, and appeals to employees of new businesses moving into West Hollywood or relocating. Insurance companies also utilize corporate rentals to house displaced families for extended periods. This is much different than a 5-day vacation rental or short-term Airbnb. There's been absolutely no research to prove that this is necessary or even what the demand is. Let's do some research, beginning with what the demand is. And now I did a bit of research myself, and I found 3 advertised in West Hollywood that were corporate housing. And I'm not positive, but from everything I found, they operate for the sole purpose of corporate housing. I've been personally involved in helping several businesses recently, in the last couple of years, who sought temporary housing until they could find a home. And one of them actually confessed to me that he finally gave up and went to an Airbnb. So let's get realistic. If we're banning corporate housing, then aren't we just forcing people to find the only furnished available short-term rental and pushing them into Airbnb? Aren't we doing exactly the opposite of what this intended ordinance is meant to do? So, as the staff report indicates, we recommend that the city gather information to the extent to what is currently being used for corporate rentals and look into alternatives that are less restrictive but still provide a regulatory framework around the use of dwelling units for corporate housing. The benefits for allowing corporate rentals of dwelling units include introducing people to the community, incentivizing corporations or businesses to be based here, and potentially reducing traffic and contributing to a walkable community. We strongly oppose an outright ban and encourage our city to get way more creative. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Blatt.
Hi, Cynthia Blatt, West Hollywood. I'm speaking as a private citizen, but as some of you know, for the last 16 years, I've worked for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development as a community planning and development representative. And part of the definition of my job is as a public trust officer. So one of the things that I know from the years that I've actually worked for the federal government for 24 years in other agencies. And I actually support this recommendation because it makes sense. But the problem is, as with any new legislation or municipal code, it's enforcement. And there does not seem to be adequate enforcement in this. And as we just saw from the Pally House hearing, they're taking the hotel's word for it that they're not renting out any more short-term. And taking the hotel's word for it has proven over the last 8 years not to be a wise choice because the day after it's approved, they're scofflaw again. So I would ask that in order to make this kind of an ordinance effective, and what are they going to do if there's no corporate rentals? They'll go to hotels. We have built so many hotel rooms in this city, and in order to fill them for uses for which they were meant to be filled, we don't want to take away from the community the tax that goes along with the hotels. So what's happening is places like the Dillon and the Huxley, which have been unable to rent their one-bedroom apartments for $3,100 a month or $3,500 a month, are using corporate rentals. And rather than pushing these businesses and these people into Airbnb, I submit they would be going to hotels, because Airbnb has pretty much been very disruptive and destructive in the city. So, guess what, guys? I support your recommendation. And as usual, I don't agree with Genevieve. Thank you very much.
Question. Cynthia,
Commissioner also has a question.
Yes, sir.
rather than they're going to hotels, why wouldn't they go to corporate rentals over on Sycamore or any block east of La Brea?
Well, you'd have to ask them. You know, at this point in time...
It was a rhetorical question.
Yeah, well, at this point in time, with respect to this ordinance, my major concern is enforcement, because enforcement is where the difficulty lies in any legislation or municipal code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you have a question? Sorry.
Well, yeah, I'm going to ask to have a couple of questions.
If we have any questions from staff, please. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. A couple of questions. I think I read in the staff report that the code compliance is going to be more proactive in enforcing this, and they're doing that right now with the short-term rentals. And
right now, it's more of on a reactive basis, but they have proposed, I think, in a few, I think not the last one, but the previous city council meeting, that they are going to kind of up their game and maybe being a more proactive approach to the short-term rental.
Aren't they reporting back to the council every 6 months on the short-term?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
I'm getting mixed messages by your response on that, but have you studied other cities, what they're doing, how they're handling this additional layer to the short-term rental ordinance, incorporating corporate housing into this?
With the research that we've done, there have been no cities that are doing a similar ban.
No cities are doing this, okay, because I was one of the ones on the long-range planning subcommittee that expressed my concerns that I think the intention is good about coming up with this such an ordinance or an additional layer to the short-term ban ordinance that we currently have, but I just felt that was kind of punitive on local businesses. And I just felt, and And I'm a little disappointed that you met with the short-term long-range planning subcommittee. We had this conversation today when you called me, and you also met with the chamber, but yet you already showed us at the last meeting when we met this same resolution, same attachment, and you said to me, yeah, we'll express your comments to the city council, but we are moving ahead with this particular resolution and attachment. So I just felt like I'm here this evening to rubber stamp this if I go along with this.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
So code compliance is going to step it up and be more proactive, but I really think that we've been, over the last year or two, putting more and more on code compliance to do a job. And I'm wondering if we've hired any more code compliance officers to handle the additional work.
We don't have the information to speak to that this evening. I know that there have been requests for that, but I can't
It
tell you
seems
whether
like
or not
they're
that has happened.
got a lot going on. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Jones?
Thanks. Garen, I asked you about this earlier, and I'm sure you can speak to it, but in the staff report on page 2, it says that several recently constructed buildings offer 1 to 6 month leases. What building? I just am not familiar. Can you speak on public record to let us know what buildings those are?
Yeah, in particular, those are buildings such as the Dillon or the Huxley on the east side that offer those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing now and open the floor for discussion. Commissioner Alchul.
Well, I think that this looks like to be a solution in search of a problem. And I agree with everything that Ms. Morrill said. And it's either something that, and I think it's detrimental to the rental market to keep things open and vacant rather than rent them for a short time to businesses that in fact are doing active business in our city, who may want some of their employees or may want some of their people that they do business with to stay here for a period of 30 days up to a year. The ordinance suggests if you have a year lease or more that the ordinance doesn't kick in. But it's obviously not an Airbnb. People come to Airbnbs for a few days, not for a few months. So I think it's unconstitutional to discriminate this way against landlords for filling their apartments on a month-to-month basis. People who are not, corporations are in effect people. They're treated like people legally. And individuals who are not corporations can rent on a month-to-month basis. And landlords are allowed to rent apartments on a month-to-month basis to anybody, except, as proposed by whomever proposed this, people who, in fact, are doing business in our city. So, as I say, I think it's unconstitutional. I think it would not stand a legal challenge. And I think, as I said before, it's a solution in search of a problem, and I intend to vote no.
Anyone else?
I think one of the major issues is that, for instance, with the two buildings that they were talking about, when we give someone a density bonus to build residential, we have something in mind, and that is that we need to fill what the city council and what a lot of other people feel is the shortage of permanent housing in West Hollywood. So if someone is coming to us for a density bonus to build residential, we have a certain thing in mind. Now, when they cannot get the high rents that they're looking for from permanent residents, then this is what they do. They either go to Airbnb or they go to corporate rentals. As far as the enforcement, the fact that you have put in the code that a corporation can't directly rent the apartment, that they can't guarantee the apartment, that's a little easier enforcement because it has to do with the contracts with the buildings. But I think what we're really trying to stop here is this idea, like the Pally House. They got a residential bonus for building residences. And then what did they do? They started renting them out like a hotel. There's a difference between a hotel and a residential building. So one thing, I mean, I think that this ordinance, for what the city council directed, I think this ordinance that you have directed, I think the language covers it very well. What I would like to recommend to my fellow commissioners is that we recommend to the city council that we look beyond this, that we look to have a particular zone where we allow corporate rentals and more short-term rentals, but they would be in the category between a hotel and residences, not residences wherein they're given a density bonus. So I think that we need to have a better definition of residential so that we can then make the distinction and possibly have a different zone. Now, some of the hotels that are coming to us that looks like it may put in too much burden on the existing hotels, differentiation was what they said was needed going forward in any new approvals. So this might be a perfect opportunity to say, we're not going to let you build a new hotel, but we're going to come up with this category that is for corporate rental, more short-term rentals, but it will fall into that, you know, more hotel category. I just don't think that we can continue pretending that residential is residential and have everybody else be able to say, no, it's actually, you know, daily or monthly rentals. So I think this follows the direction. I think it's good for what it is, but I would like to look beyond it to both accommodate corporate rentals and, on the other hand, protect our residential bonuses.
Thank you. Commissioner Buckner?
Yes.
Vice Chair Buckner, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I also served on the long-term planning meeting when this came before us, and I still have the same reservations that I had at the time. I agree with Commissioner Altschul that I don't think that it would pass the muster test of the legally. I find it very restrictive. I think it, in some ways, would cause a lot of corporations and businesses who have employees that are resettling maybe in this area and looking for more permanent housing from using, being here, going to our restaurants, using our stores, and so forth. So I was opposed to it for that reason. I think that enforcement is a real issue here. I also agree with Commissioner Altschul that it seems like, what was the reason for this? What's the real problem? We don't even know whether it is something that's going on a rather large basis that would require us to pass legislation or ordinance to correct a problem that may not even exist. So, and I also like what my fellow commissioner down here said about the density bonus issue. Perhaps moving forward, if we're going to give a density bonus, we might be able to condition I guess whatever we agree to do, condition it so that there would be, they wouldn't be allowed to do short-term rentals in those buildings if they're given a density bonus. That's something we could look at as we move forward. So I do agree with Commissioner Lightfoot, though, that it seems that staff has done what council has asked you to do, so I'm sort of between. I guess I would like to move it on to council, but I'm not really going to do it with the suggestion that it be approved. I don't know if we can do that, but that's what I would do.
Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Commissioner Altschul that it's a solution looking for a problem, and I think it serves a need. versus a hotel room versus an apartment. For a corporate rental, you can have a family, you can have a pet, you can have a couple. Staying in a hotel room for a long period of time is not a lot of fun. I've done it for a year, the same room. And driving someone out in order to get food and not allowing them to cook and just basically be able to acclimate and enjoy being displaced, whether they be being transferred or whether they're on a field assignment. And corporations, I don't think are going to do this. It's just I find it hard to reconcile the logic. It's if they want somebody to, they'll take a hotel room out of service. They'll rent a hotel room for a year versus renting an apartment for a year. I mean, there's a financial break even to that. So, and just the part about insurance companies renting them to be able to accommodate displaced residences. I mean, there's definitely a need. I don't see it as a big problem. So I just really can't support this in its current form.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. I do agree with Sheila that we need to consider intent here in terms of density bonus. So it's really important that we consider that, and I'm completely in agreement with you there. I also find it problematic that, if there is housing stock that is not being rented, better someone be able to use it, a company, to put up their employees. I mean, I can say as someone who travels maybe a little more frequently for work than I would like, that hotel living can be great, but it's nice to have a place where there's not someone in your room every day. You don't have to pay for things like room service, et cetera. I also want to say that I've stayed at Airbnbs at home and abroad in other countries, and they regularly will list that they are available for corporate. So I don't kind of know how that fits into what we're considering here, but I do want to bring it up as a point because I've looked in Paris, I've looked in the Midwest, San Francisco, Seattle, et cetera, and there are regularly listings that say, also available for corporate in terms of their accommodations. Lots of people travel for months out of the year and would love to rent their apartments for more than 30 days. At this point in time, it's not so much that I don't approve of the intent of it, but I also feel like we need to do more fact-finding in terms of I don't want to ban it outright, especially without knowing what some of the unforeseen consequences may be. So that's where I stand on it at this time.
Commissioner DeLucia?
Can we continue this to another date?
Well, I have some comments too.
Yep.
If I can. I was trying to let everybody. All this talk about a solution looking for a problem. If I had to guess what the problem was, it's affordable housing, right? There's an affordable housing shortage in the city, and it's getting worse. So, if I were to reverse engineer, this situation, I'd say, well, what are the city's sources of affordable housing? One is obvious, right? It's the affordable housing units that come along with the density bonuses that are approved for all these projects. The other is rent-stabilized housing. That's, the city's biggest chunk of affordable housing that's available to our residents, and it was one of the tenets upon which our city was founded. To that end, I would, looking at the flip side of this, right? Units that aren't rent stabilized, that aren't subject to rent control, are just that. They're market rate units, and when they're on the market, they go to the highest bidder, whoever that bidder may be. That's why developers develop units, because they want them to be leased on the open market. And as Commissioner Altschul had mentioned earlier, if we're looking at it in the constitutional sense, corporations are people. Well, they're not physical people, but they have certain rights, and they have rights to go on the open market and rent housing. So to that, taking all of this into consideration, I would feel comfortable, and I'm going to try to come up with a suggestion, and then maybe we can kind of start going from there, or we can table it to another date if that's the consensus. But I would be comfortable restricting, corporate housing when it comes to either rent-stabilized units or affordable units in the city, which obviously I think that's that's not even an issue because they have to be rented out for affordable. But, you know, when it comes to market rate housing that was built after, 1979, whatever the year is, whatever, you know, if the unit is not rent stabilized, if it's out on the open market, then it should be treated as such. That's kind of my intention, because the market will dictate, you know, what it should do. That's why it's market rate housing. That's my opinion. But I don't know.
And I think that is definitely the intent of this ordinance, is to do with a housing shortage and to protect housing in the city. And my assumption is that a lot of this housing that's rented out, now we haven't done our research, and we should do our research, is it prior to 79, or is a lot of this newer housing? And I'm hearing a couple of examples cited this evening that they couldn't rent out those units in those buildings, so maybe they're using it for corporate housing. I don't know. We don't have I don't have the fact for that. But I mean, so if these are newer buildings, I understand where you're coming from. But if they're, I suspect, and I haven't even done a survey, which we should be doing, that a lot of this could be newer housing.
See, my concern would be, for instance, let's just say, you know, Corporation X went and rented a unit in a building that was built in 1975, and they decide, you know what, we have people coming in and out of the city a lot, and we're only paying $1,500 a month, and market rent for it is $3,000 a month, so you know what, we'll just hang on to this unit. That would be my concern, but maybe I'm looking at this
Do you want
wrong
to
way.
try to make a motion modifying what's in the resolution?
I'd like to discuss more to see if people, you know, anyone else agrees with me, or I'm just totally off base here.
No, I tend to agree with you.
I agree with you, because I think the examples we heard were at the Dillon and the Huxley, and those are brand new. And I think they'll probably find it at the, I don't know what they're calling the old Movie Town Plaza, Avalon Bay project. I think they'll probably find it there that they won't be able to rent them all at high market rates. So I think they should definitely have the advantage of renting it for corporate housing. And if you want to put a minimum amount on it, maybe at least 60 days. That might be acceptable.
The city attorney's looking at me like I'm nuts. Is there something I'm doing wrong?
No, I'm just trying to think through what an ordinance would look, if you come back with an alternative, I think we want to go back to the drawing board and not send something up tonight, so we can think through some of these
To see if it's even
topics,
feasible.
to see if it's feasible. It's not something we can really
So
draft.
then you would
I'm not
suggest-
totally nuts then. It's not certified.
I'm just trying, you saw the wheels turning in my mind, trying to think it through.
Well, because this is a result of city council direction, there's that to consider as well. Now, we might, I think we might offer an alternative for the city council. So in other words, if we continued it and had them come back, perhaps we could offer this along with an alternative for the city council to consider. But this is, you know, and I looked again at city council direction, and this is pretty much the ordinance that city council asked for. So, you know, deciding whether it's, you know, it's the right thing or not the right thing, it is what the city council asked for.
I just felt like and I agree, this is what they asked for, but I just feel like, then why are you even bringing it to us if they want to just bring it back to them? I just felt like what was not reflected in what in what I'm reading here this evening, what's offered, is I want our input reflected. I just don't feel like by rubber stamping it, it doesn't, in the staff report, it doesn't reflect what our concerns are. So I would make a motion that maybe we continue this to a date uncertain, renotice it, and yes, come back and maybe move forward with this, with two options, with this resolution, and another one reflecting what the thinking of the Planning Commission.
But if we're going to continue it, then we have to give direction to staff as to why we want them to continue. What do you want them to do when they bring it back? What difference is?
So what do you want
Because I think we're pretty much clear about what it is that concerns us. So why come back unless you're going to do some kind of a study to see how many units are being rented out for corporate housing?
And
by the way, I know that there are other units, condominium units in buildings, not the Dillon and so forth, that are being rented out for corporate or 6 months or 3 months at a time. I think, you can call them Airbnbs or you can call them whatever you want, but they're being rented out for less than a year in many buildings in the city.
Any landlord has the right
Yeah, of
to rent
course.
their apartments
Yeah.
on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, as long as they want.
A non-rent stabilized unit is strictly at the discretion of the landlord.
Correct.
Well, it seems
Or
to
they buy the condo.
It seems to me like we need to have a vote on this, either a yes or no vote, for it to go to city council. Now, if we want to do separately some recommendations to the city council, and either do that now just as, as recommendations, or if we want it to come back with, if we give direction to staff for a solid alternative, but one way or the other, we need to vote up or down on what the city gave us direction on, I believe.
I have a question for staff. Oh, go ahead, please.
Sure. I was just going to clarify what Commissioner Lightfoot was saying. The commission has the ability to approve the recommendation, deny the recommendation, or approve it with modifications. And so if you would, if there's some discussion, if you would like us to prepare a modified resolution based on your direction, we can bring that
Well, let me
back
try
for
to
consideration.
get some things in order. So I have a question. If we were to continue the item, is there any additional research that we could do within a reasonable time frame, or any data that we can obtain that you haven't been able to obtain, or would we just be treading water?
In terms of, say, an accurate survey of the number of units that are involved,
Correct.
it would be almost impossible for us to do that in a comprehensive way.
So if we give you an extension, then effectively it would just be possibly to figure out, it'll be for the city attorney to figure out how to craft whatever we might come up with today. That's item one. Great. Okay. Item two. So we're in a position where we either support the staff's recommendation, oppose staff's recommendation, or come up with an alternative. Now, it sounds like, just based on kind of what I'm hearing with a general consensus, that there is potentially a modified version of the recommendation that we might be able to move forward to council. No?
I don't think tonight.
You're not tonight?
I think
Not tonight, but
I think we need to deny this, and they need to come back if they want.
But with some of what we
And
discussed.
I think during our discussion, I think we've kind of given them direction.
And I prefer not to deny it. I prefer to continue it. And I don't want to be in a position where I want to deny this. I want to continue it. And we gave a lot of direction this evening. And David, I thought you gave great direction about putting a time frame.
But we need to give them some kind of direction. For instance, if we continue it, well, what kind of a recommendation are they going to?
Why do we continue?
Give the recommendations now? That's what so maybe someone will make a motion kind of recommending something, and we'll go from there.
Well, then we can maybe bring it back in our next meeting. How long would you need to come back with something if we gave you modifications?
It's hard to say. It depends on what they are. But
Okay.
we would need to do the research and come back. You would, you don't need to deny this. You could, I believe, just make a recommendation to us to bring back a modified ordinance based on your direction.
Exactly.
And I believe you've been taking notes on everything that we've said that's been pertinent. So could you frame that into a modified ordinance?
I'm not sure there was consensus
Present a consensus.
yet.
So I'll craft a motion and let's see what happens. Okay. So I would move to modify the recommendation that's before us to restrict such a ban to either rent-stabilized units in the city or affordable units, rent-stabilized and or affordable units in the city.
Make that motion. It's good.
I've made that
And I'll
motion.
second your motion,
And I would vote for it.
if I can
Well-
get my thing to work.
There we go.
Are we
So
going to put a limit on
a limit on,
the term of the rental term?
is that something that was on the table?
Is that something you're interested in
You
entertaining?
mean a minimum rental
A
term?
minimum rental term. Well, you had mentioned 60 days. Is that something?
I would say 60 days would be the
I would say 6 months.
maximum minimum.
I say 6 months.
Me too.
90 days?
90 days, I say.
In my notes.
90 days?
90 days.
Okay, so let me understand. So you're telling the city council that what you're recommending is you're okay with the language here, but you would restrict it to only older rent-stabilized buildings or affordable housing, and they're never going to be able to do corporate rentals, I don't think, on affordable housing. So,
just making it clear.
So really, all we're talking about is you want to change it so that corporate rentals are only banned for older rent-stabilized units.
Not older and stabilized units, but trying to, I mean, the general theme is to protect affordable housing.
Yeah, but they're, okay, seriously, aren't there too many restrictions in place for affordable units to be able to get away with corporate rentals?
Yes, but I think we would just be I mean, that's superfluous. I think we'd just be memorializing it for the sake of memorializing it.
Exactly.
So, just taking a step back though.
First of all, affordable units come with restrictions on how much rent you can charge.
Right.
So no, you don't even have to include affordable.
So we can take that
units.
out.
Leave that out.
Stabilized, you can't rent them out anyway, once they're,
No, but I mean, if a rent stabilized unit comes on the market, then a corporation.
well, then they're market rate.
They're destabilized.
Then they're market rate.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that is getting at the problem that City Council had in mind. What City Council, I believe, had in mind, this was Councilmember Heilman's item, was it not? I believe that the problem they saw was, instead of providing the city with permanent housing, when they can't get really high rents for some of the new apartments from permanent residents, then they are going to other avenues where they can possibly get the higher rents. Now, if they didn't have that option, then their alternatives are either to leave their units empty or to lower their prices. And so possibly what City Council has in mind is they may not, they may say, well, we can't get $3,500 a month for these apartments, obviously, so we're going to lower them to $3,200 a month. That is, I think that's probably the extension of the thought process that went in there. But be that as it may, if we do what you suggest, Chair, I think that is something that could be offered to the City Council, but I think that we should include that as an option. So vote for it and say that this is the alternative, and if you want to vote for that alternative and then vote down this one, I don't know, staff, what is really the best way to do that?
The issue is, and the reason I crafted the motion the way I did is that there isn't a consensus on on the council's direction. That's the issue.
Also, I think we need to take into consideration insurance companies that would need less than 90 days or 60 days to relocate somebody whose house had a fire, and all they had to do was repair the kitchen. And I don't think there's any reason to deny those rentals.
City Attorney?
I don't think the insurance example was covered here because it talks about the business entity making the unit available for its officers, employees, consultants, vendors, and contractors. So if an insurance company was putting up a displaced family because of the damage to their home, I don't think it would be prohibited under this.
Well, then can we state that those things are strictly allowed, they're specifically allowed?
I think it's
I guess it wouldn't fall under the definition of corporate housing.
Well, if Farmers Insurance Company, is there still a Farmers Insurance?
Yes.
If Farmers Insurance Company wishes to rent housing for victims of disasters who need replacement for short periods of time, Farmers is a corporation. They're going to pay the check directly.
But they're not providing it to their employees.
Providing
That's
it to
the second piece
their
of the
beneficiaries.
ordinance.
Then we can specifically exclude insurance companies for their policyholders from the
I
ordinance.
suppose you could add language that says.
I don't think we have
Of course we can.
But
But we may not have to, but it may be okay.
But it already doesn't fall under the definition of corporate housing, is what you're saying. So any insurance housing for people who were displaced by some kind of disaster or home damage would not fall under, would not be subject to this ordinance, correct?
Right.
I just go back to, I feel like, yes, this probably does comply, as you're saying, Cheryl, but complies to what council's direction, because actually it is, if you read the report initiated by Councilman Howman, it does say it's referring to both affordable and market rate housing is the intent here to come up with an ordinance. I just felt like you took this staff memo and you prepared these documents, and I just felt like no research went into it. It's like anything we do here, when we come up with conditions and resolutions, we come up with mitigations and we come up with background and we match it to the general plan and the zoning ordinance. I feel like a lot of that wasn't done here. A lot of the research is not in here. So that's why I felt like I'm just rubber stamping something without, I don't know, was the intention really staff said, council said do this and just do it, or did they expect you to come back with some kind of a rationale behind it in order to validate what we're doing, instead of, as staff, going back and saying, well, yes, we can do this, however, we don't really have the rationale. It's like, I feel like you
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Except in this town, when it comes to rental units or anything having to do with rent, if you go not door to door and ask what you're doing with rental units, it's like saying, do you beat your wife? You're not going to give an accurate answer if you are, if you're doing something that you think you shouldn't be.
Well, I think you know our concern.
Sorry, City Attorney?
Yeah.
Well, I would say maybe I can make a suggestion. If you're comfortable with the language and you think that it mirrors what the council asked you to do, maybe you send up the resolution saying, if you want to amend the zoning code, we're okay with the language, but we have these issues with it. We want you to consider enforcement. We want you to consider, and maybe just add another paragraph.
That's a good idea. So maybe what we do is we, send it along and say, but these are the concerns we have. I think that's not a bad idea. Maybe we go down the road and we identify, John doesn't like that, but maybe we do that.
I also felt like the 1 year seemed like a long time. I was thinking of 6 months seems more appropriate for a corporate housing situation. But I don't know. It's just
I
a
think
thought.
3 months is better.
3 months is okay too, it's less. I agree with you.
Who does not?
The 1 year is too long.
So let's just take an informal survey quickly, and then we'll tag, although there's technically a motion on the floor, right? So should I withdraw it, or?
Yes.
Can I withdraw? I'd like to withdraw my motion.
And I think if we do that kind of a motion, it should be also conditioned with, and specifically stated, that there be no expansion of the definition of who the corporation could put in there, or could not put in there. In other words, limited to their employees, to this, to that, to whatever.
Well, if you want changes to the language, we should send those up, because the council has to see your exact recommendation on the language in the code.
Well, John, just to discuss that, are you bringing up the insurance issue again?
If we take the period of time, such as 90 days, and approve the ordinance,
right,
I think it strictly has to relate to no corporate housing for the corporation's employees and whatever else they.
Right.
But for instance, if the Schubert Company decided to put on Hamilton here, they could put the cast up, couldn't they?
No.
No,
Why not?
they have to go to a hotel.
They have to go to a hotel because they're a corporation putting up an employee.
But the Schubert Company may not be their employer. The production company is.
Well, then,
But still a corporation.
It's still the.
corporate.
Well, I think the Schubert Company ought to be able to put Hamilton's cast up
Pushes
here.
them into hotels.
Sure.
yes.
I want to remind the commission that it sounds like there's a lot of discomfort with the direction of the ordinance in general, and you certainly have the ability to recommend denial of the council's direction. We can forward to them that the commission recommended denial of the zone text amendment rather than modifying it.
Okay.
That is
So
an
somebody-
appropriate course of action as well.
But let me add, we would do that in a resolution explaining all the reasons why you've heard tonight. So
Okay.
we would bring back a resolution of denial.
I don't like
So
this
I had retracted my previous motion, so let's clear that. Does somebody want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we deny the recommendation to pass this resolution and forward the concerns as to the reasons why to the council.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Is there a second?
Second.
is there a second? Okay.
I would bring that back on consent next time for
We'll
you
bring that
to
back on
see the
consent.
reasons.
Is
listed.
there, have you been able to take notes on all the reasons that we had mentioned?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I'd
is there
like
any
to
other
make
question
one
or
more
comment?
mention, one more issue that bothered me. The issue with regard to residential condominium projects where you're ordering them to add a condition in their CCNRs. That would be only for new projects?
Correct.
So any,
New CCNRs.
okay, because it's quite costly to change CCNRs and go through that process for any that are already
And
existing.
include in there that it would only be for new, which I think would be difficult to enforce.
I agree it's difficult to enforce, but it's also, maybe we ought to
How
include
about if
that.
We do
how
review
about
new
if that be a
CCNRs.
recommendation to new condominium projects?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
That be a recommendation to new condominium projects, not a mandate.
That new condominium projects don't let their
That
co-owners.
the city recommends
co-housing.
to new condominium projects that they don't let their owners rent to corporate.
People less than 3
Recommends.
months.
A heavy,
What a mandate.
heavy suggestion.
But
That's restrictive.
It doesn't preclude corporations from buying a unit.
That's true.
And then they can put whoever in there wants.
Are there any other
Okay,
questions for,
so-
or questions for staff?
Yeah, all I can say is good luck. This is really, it's just really convoluted, starting with the fact that the motion is to deny what's in front of us instead of just the motion of the resolution. I think this is going to be a little, a little tough. Let me just suggest just one other thing, if I might, before we vote. That we kind of go the route that Donald was suggesting, that we continue this and ask staff to offer some simple language for an alternative for the city council to consider, as well as alternatives for other issues that we think need to be addressed with this.
Is that just?
There's a motion on the floor.
No, excuse me, is that just substitute motion? You can make a substitute motion, and I'll second it.
Yes.
But no,
Yes.
That was supersede
everybody
this
stop
motion.
1 second. There's a motion on the floor.
No, you can make a substitute motion.
Yes.
Yes?
Want to make that
I
motion?
can, yes.
And
I'd
I'll
like to-
second your motion.
I'd
I
like
just-
to make a substitute motion, which is what I said, that we continue the item to ask staff to put together, from what they've heard, some language for a reasonable alternative, and also to make a recommendation with some of the other things that we voiced our concerns about regarding residential as something to present to council along with this.
So it would be, the substitute motion is to recommend denial of this, but also come back with.
I don't think it was recommending denial of this.
No, my substitute motion is to continue it for staff to put language together for an alternative
Okay.
that we could vote on, and that staff also come back with some recommendations that we can pass on to city council for some of the other things like like zoning, a definition of residential, things along that nature that would be separate from but a recommendation.
Reread the zoning code. You want to
We can't rewrite the zoning code.
No, to add, to add something to incorporate corporate rentals into a particular zone.
I mean, second your motion, however, the way I seconded it was to be more, I mean, those are long-term things that have to
Yeah.
do with a
Yeah,
rewrite.
just as a recommendation.
I wanted to second it in the sense where I don't want to outright deny what staff came up with, even though I don't agree with it at this time, but I wanted you to go back and go back and relook this, and look at all the things we put on the table this evening, and then come back at a date uncertain, you'll renotice it, and we can take another look at this, and then perhaps send it up to council.
And I'm fine with that.
That's
I
my-
think if it goes past next March 8th, the whole thing will disappear
Yeah,
anyway.
so that's my substitute motion. So I'll second that, okay.
So to continue off calendar for staff to come up with alternatives based on the conversation.
Substitute motion, correct.
Substitute motion you vote on first.
Do we vote on this?
We're voting on the substitute motion now?
Yes.
If you're asking us to come, if you're asking us to come back with alternative motions, it would be extremely helpful for us to have some consensus on what that should include. I'm not clear from the discussion tonight what you would be asking for us to come back with.
And I don't think we are, we're clear either, to tell you the truth. And that's why I would, as I've already voted no, because I don't think that we can ask you to go back and do something that you don't know what we want you to do. You have to create something new. Why? So that we just don't deny something to go forward? I don't know.
Okay, the substitute in the motion has been,
So the substitute motion has failed. Now we're back to the first motion, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we I'll call the question on the original motion. And
And the motion
Come
is
back with
to
a denial
deny,
resolution.
denial with listing all the concerns that we had mentioned.
Okay,
And then,
And then bring it back at the next meeting?
on consent.
well, on
next meeting.
consent.
bring it
Correct.
back when they get it done.
I'm so confused. Hold on, I didn't vote.
We can count to 7.
You don't know how I voted.
It
How
says
did, no, it doesn't say.
Where are you?
I'll vote yes on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Isn't your machine?
David? I don't know what's going on. No. Do we have to revote?
You can. I mean, we have the vote, but if you'd like to,
Push it again.
yeah. We'll need the motion and second again.
Someone needs to second it. Okay.
I move it.
And now let's vote again. David?
Motion passes, 6 ayes, 1 no.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll go on to new business. There's none. Unfinished business, item 12A, draft commercial historic resources survey.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, sure. Let's take a 5-minute break.
That was confusing. Huh? Well, it doesn't make any sense. I don't think. The thing is that I understand the concept is to sort of make sure that we have our housing stock available, but landlord, if they can't rent it, then they can't rent it. They have a right.
Good night. Bye.
Night, thank you. Thank you, sweetheart, thank you. Thanks for your input. See you later.
You were there 5 years, weren't you?
Almost 7.
Remember the bookstore, right? But that was chain, right?
No, there were two. Yeah, got it. Me too. Because I may be moving out of the city. My daughter, I think, is going to be moving. I think my daughter's going to move to the Bay Area.
Oh, is she? She lives in the valley, right? I love that article that she wrote. Wasn't that a great article? You know, in the LA Times.
Well, it's interesting. People have all different kinds of reactions to it.
I didn't. I read. I don't know who. I never look at who wrote it until I read it. And then at the end, it was just. She's a good writer. It was excellent. She got paid for that, right?
I don't know. I think they do get
You get like $300 or
something
something.
like that. I didn't ask her. She got the money.
She's not a. She doesn't write for a living. Does she?
Press releases and everything.
Okay, so yeah. But it wasn't really a good story. I know, but it was a good writer. She did a good job with that.
Who?
My daughter.
Oh, how nice.
That's not going to be anymore.
Okay, what's the name of it?
In yoga.
All right, I think we are all here. So we will move on to item 12A, the Draft Commercial Historic Resources Survey. Staff?
Yes. Good evening, Chairperson Nagai and members of the Commission. We're happy to present the final draft of the Commercial Historic Resources Survey. The project was completed over the last 11 months, including 7 other public meetings, while working with our consulting team of GPA and HPC subcommittee of 3 commissioners and the public. The survey efforts consist of 3 main components: a historic context statement of commercial and non-residential buildings, a reconnaissance level survey, and an intensive level evaluation. In total, GPA surveyed a little under 800 properties throughout the city, constructed up to and including 1975 at the reconnaissance level. Throughout the process, we received input from the public on individual properties and general areas. The most recent changes to the survey report from your agenda packet last month included a few minor revisions. Our consultant will be elaborating on those changes. At this time, there's no formal action required by the Planning Commission, given that the Historic Preservation Commission had the purview of reviewing the final and the final draft, which will also be scheduled to be presented at the City Council for adoption on December 5th. Equally excited for the commercial survey. Staff has been working with GPA and Citrus Studios to create our new user-friendly historic preservation website, which will launch within the next few weeks. The mobile-friendly auxiliary website is a comprehensive source for all historic preservation information in West Hollywood, including a searchable database of all surveyed properties and designated cultural resources using Ruskin ARC, which is a cloud-based system making the information about the designated and surveyed properties readily available to the public online. So with that, I'd like to introduce Teresa Grimes from GPA Consulting. Teresa will be providing an overview of the report, how its format, how it's broken down, and we're both available for questions. Teresa.
Thank you, Tony. So as Tony mentioned, the project included 3 components: a context statement, a survey, and then the development of a website. And although those components were somewhat discrete, they happened somewhat simultaneously, and there was some back and forth between each component. So the historic context statement focused on the commercial history of West Hollywood, and you can see that that's actually built into the title. However, we also address the industries and the institutions that help shape the built environment. We addressed the period up to cityhood, 1984, because we thought that that was a more natural breaking point within kind of the modern history of West Hollywood. Certainly a more natural point than other dates. Originally, the context was organized by themes, but after receiving comments from the HPC subcommittee, it was organized into 4 periods. 1985, the oldest known buildings in Sherman, to 1965, that's when the name of Sherman changed to West Hollywood, and then 1926 to 1945, that was a major growth period in West Hollywood. 1946 to 65 is just the post-war period, and then 1966 to 1984. In preparing the context statement, as Tony mentioned, we had multiple community meetings. We met with a subcommittee of the HPC and then also one-on-one with individual members of the public who had special knowledge of the history of West Hollywood, particularly with regard to kind of the commercial and commercial history and the industries that played an important role in the built environment that we see. We also conducted a reconnaissance survey of 763 properties that are in commercial and public zoning districts. And those were constructed through 1975, and you might be asking why 1975, because it's not, it was not particularly random. 1975, typically the State Office of Historic Preservation recommends that historic resource surveys include properties constructed over 45 years of age. So when we made our survey up to 1975, we were being a little bit more liberal because we wanted the survey to have a longer shelf life. The reconnaissance survey and research for the historic context statement resulted in the identification of property types associated with each period. After we completed a draft of the context statement, we returned to the historic resource survey. The 763 buildings surveyed actually also included 84 previously designated landmarks because our scope of work also included assisting the staff in consolidating all of the information on historic properties in West Hollywood into one new and improved database. Those 84 properties, of the 84, there were 27 that were commercial, industrial, or institutional. So even though we surveyed 763 and we're calling it a commercial survey, there were some residential buildings in there, but we didn't resurvey them. It was merely photographing them and then uploading the existing information to the new improved database. 89 individual properties and one group were identified for further research and evaluation. So that was the intensive level survey that Tony alluded to. Only those properties were photographed because the database is linked to Google Maps. So one of the questions that we'd gotten in our Historic Preservation Commission meeting was whether or not we had actually visited all 763 buildings. And the answer is yes, but we didn't actually think it was a good use of time to actually photograph those buildings because we're trying to move to a paperless survey. So now when you open up the database, you'll be able to just click on a map, and then you'll see a Google Street View. And Google will, you know, as you know, they update their photo files somewhat more regularly than what the city would have the ability to do. Of those 89 properties, 58 properties in one group were evaluated as eligible for landmark designation. 16 of the 58 and one group were evaluated as eligible under the local ordinance, and one or both of the national or state programs. The grouping that I'm referring to is Sunset Plaza, and that includes 14 properties, 10 contributing and 4 non-contributing. So then that left us with 41 properties that were evaluated under the local ordinance, and then the remainder were evaluated as ineligible. So while we identified 89 for further research, in some cases that meant that we researched them and we thought the research might lead us in one direction, but it actually led us into another direction where we didn't find sufficient information that warranted evaluation under the criteria or aspects of integrity that are required by either the national state programs or the local ordinance. At the conclusion of the historic resource survey, then we went back to the context statement and we revised it with more information. We also revised it with more feedback that we received from the HPC subcommittee and members of the public as well. And then we revised it again after the full HPC meeting in June. So the report that you have before you this evening is different from the one that was sent earlier in a few aspects. First, it just included some minor corrections. It included more illustrations. One of the comments that we received that was that the commission wanted to see more maps, so we added those. Another comment that we received from the HPC committee meeting, I'm sorry, the commission meeting in June was that they wanted more way funding. They wanted the report to be more user-friendly, so we added some more appendices. And then some of the inventory forms were just inadvertently missing from the earlier version, so that accounts for kind of the additional pages from the previous report and the report that you have tonight. And then most importantly, the commission meeting and then comments from the members of the public, they ask us to revisit some of the evaluations. So in some situations, properties that had only been evaluated as eligible under the local ordinance, we looked at them again and went back to our research. In some cases, we actually went back to the buildings in person and decided that we actually thought that they might be eligible for listing in California or national registers as well. And then in other cases, they were evaluated as ineligible, and we looked at them again and changed the evaluation to eligible under the local ordinance. So as I mentioned, although you have a lot of paper in front of you this evening, our hope is that what people will really be referring to in the future is the website. The context statement will be uploaded to the website, and then probably the most important aspect of the website will be its link to this database that will be searchable in a variety of ways. And so, one way you could search the database is actually just by exploring the map and clicking on one of the pins. You could also search the database by searching for a name, either a street name or the name of an architect. You could search for a style of building. You could even just search for designated or properties that are designated in the National Register. So it's very user-friendly. We've received a lot of positive feedback on it from when we've demonstrated it at meetings, and I think everyone's very excited about it. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, so the changes that were that were made, I believe one was added to eligible, one ineligible, and then a few changes in the in the status of the evaluation. So those were all reflective of what HPC, the direction that HPC had given you. So now we're completely up to date with what we're looking at, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And also, can you tell me what the code 5S2 means? Because I didn't find it in the list, and it shows as like a previous status of a few of them in the eligible list.
In the 5S2 is not a code that we applied in this survey because it's somewhat, the language is actually somewhat redundant with 5S3, appears eligible for local listing or designation.
So it's similar to 5S3?
Correct.
Okay, it was just because I looked for it on the list and I didn't see it. And finally, I wanted to ask you on the list of the designated properties. Were evaluations done on those properties for the categories in which they are not designated? For instance, if they're designated local, were they evaluated for eligibility for national or California?
No, our scope of work didn't include reevaluating any properties that were already designated.
Okay, and finally, has city staff ever actually prepared an application for either a city designation or for a California or national designation, where planning staff actually did that?
Yes, city staff has initiated or has processed designations at the direction of city council. Some of them were quite a few of them were done after the city's initial 1986 survey. Others were done after the 2008 survey.
Okay. And by the way, lining up the DPRs to match the list is really great. So, thanks for doing the work to do that. They're much easier to follow.
Sure.
So hearing none, I think, and is there any public comment on this item? No? So then we close the public hearing, and then do we just receive it and file it? Is there a motion or anything that's required?
No, there's no action required.
No action required. Awesome.
I would like to make a recommendation, if I could. We are allowed to do that, correct?
Sure.
On the list of designated properties, I would like to recommend that the City Council consider having staff work on applications, at least on these properties that are designated, to get any that are designated at the national or California level, to have staff prepare applications to have them designated locally. That seems like kind of a no-brainer. And also, I know that there's one property here that when it received its environmental review, it's number 7, 1343 Laurel. I believe the environmental review stated that it was eligible for California and national, so maybe we could add that as well for something for staff to actually do on an active basis on these designated properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to the next item of unfinished business, which is the Planning Commission Subcommittee appointments. And I've decided to keep everybody in their current roles, so that's an easy item. We'll go on to item 13, excluded consent calendar, there's none. Item 14A, items from staff, planning managers update.
Just a friendly reminder, we are having our historic preservation event this coming Thursday. It'll be at the Schindler House from 6 to 8, and we hope to see all of you there.
Thank you very much. Public comment, do we have any slips? Thank you, David. Items from Commissioner Jones.
Yes, actually, is this thing on? Sorry. I have a few comments. One, I just wanted to remind the public that the annual Congress of Commissions and Boards is next Saturday, October 29th. I imagine most of us will be in attendance, but I believe it is an opportunity for us to meet and also for us to receive training. I don't have any specifics about that, but something that is coming up. I also wanted to notice for public record, I'll also email staff about this. I'm not going to be at the next meeting. I'm going to be traveling to Africa for my job, so I will not be at the November 3rd meeting. And I also just want to say on record, and I know not everybody is here to kind of hear this or watches the planning commission meetings on TV, since I'm sure some people have better things to do. But I just want to let everyone know that I am always happy to take a meeting, a coffee, take a walk in your neighborhood, a phone call, an email. I am always available and will make myself available to you, members of the public, for meetings about things that are of concern to you. So please do reach out to me. I do have cards. I'm happy to write down my information if I don't, but I just want to say that on record again. That's all.
Commissioner Lucia?
I think I said enough tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alja?
I have two, thank you.
Vice Chair Buckner?
Yeah, I just want to announce that I will not be able to attend the November 3rd meeting. I will also be out of town.
Sorry, Commissioner Haven?
I'll be here.
Commissioner Lightfoot?
Yeah, I've definitely said enough tonight. Thank you.
And with that, we will adjourn the meeting of the Planning Commission to our next meeting of November 3rd. Thank you.